Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rob Greenwood, Director of the Harris Center at Memorial University, and thank you for joining us for our fourth session of the Harris Center special series, Scenario Sessions, Conversations Exploring the Impacts of COVID-19 on the Economy of Newfoundland and Labrador. We are happy to be able to present these sessions in partnership with the amazing Amira Innovation Exchange here at Memorial Signal Hill campus. I'm here in the conference room all by myself on one side with John Duff handling the technology on the other side. But through the wonders, of course, of online, delighted to be connecting across the province and around the world. So far in these sessions, we have spoken with experts in business, tourism, and mining. And today we dive into clean growth. As the world continues to move toward a lower carbon future, the demand for clean technologies and environmental services will increase. And there are strong indications that initiatives designed for post-COVID stimulus initiatives will also be clean growth oriented. Just this morning, in fact, NIA, the Newfoundland Environmental Industries Association, released a vision of clean growth for Newfoundland and Labrador's economic recovery. Even before the pandemic, it was estimated that the global market for clean growth, clean technologies would grow to $2.5 trillion by 2022, up from $1.1 trillion in 2012. And so the development, application, and export of clean technology presents an enormous opportunity for Newfoundland and Labrador businesses. Firms engaged in clean technology development are innovation focused, require highly skilled workers, and are export oriented. Some of the key ingredients Newfoundland and Labrador needs for economic recovery and long-term growth. In fact, one of the key driving areas for the focus of these scenario sessions is that we have to have exports outside the province to bring in new money. And there's lots of successful sectors doing that. So what are Newfoundland and Labrador's strengths in clean tech and the green economy? And what are the challenges and opportunities? To help us shed some light on this industry, we have two guests with us today. Ashley Smith is owner and managing director of Fundamental Inc., a socially focused firm which provides consulting and support for climate-based action. They have clients from the private and public sectors, commercial, residential, governmental, and institutional. Ashley has a bachelor's degree in environmental science and chemistry from McGill University and a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of Toronto. She has over 18 years experience in sustainable design, community planning, construction project management, and renewable energy. Welcome, Ashley. Our second guest is Robert Woolgar. Robert is the president and CEO for Growler Energy, with over 23 years of experience in project management, renewable energy, dam safety, and water resources. He is from the glorious community of Conception Bay South. We were comparing notes on how we both went to high school there, and graduated from Memorial University's Civil Engineering program in 1996. An experienced project manager, Robert has worked in the renewable energy industry in Newfoundland and Labrador and Manitoba. Robert's current focus is leading Growler Energy's renewable energy vision while providing support to ongoing company development and professional services initiatives. Welcome, Robert, along with Ashley.
Thank you.
So for those of you viewing online, I'll throw some questions at Robert and Ashley to get us going. But if you're on WebEx, you can go to the right-hand side and post questions there. And those on Facebook Live, we have Mandy Rousel keeping track of the chat there, and you'll be able to ask questions there. So first of all, really for Ashley and Robert to get going, what does clean technology look like? It's an emerging industry for many of us. It's already significant in the province. From some of the discussion we had ahead of time, there are ways in which the industry is different in Newfoundland and Labrador from other jurisdictions. And in my understanding, it's largely an enabler, a lot like IT, where it's a very significant sector, but it's also one that enables other sectors. So Ashley, do you want to lead off and give us a picture from your perspective, and then I'll turn to Robert.
Thanks very much.
So in terms of how I would define the clean tech as an industry sector, I would look at it as the nesting together of an awareness of social responsibility along with a desire to have a reduced climate or environmental impact. And so that's what sort of the definition in my view of what the sector is really aimed at. Um, with respect to how that works in terms of Newfoundland versus Canada or other jurisdictions or even a global jurisdiction, the focus here is that Newfoundland has a lot of advantages and is very resource rich. We have I think the third best wind resource in the world. We have tidal. We have other ocean opportunities. We have like a center of an island. We have a better solar resource than most imagine. Um, and so, in terms of putting clean tech into the context of Newfoundland and Labrador, we're looking at, in my estimation, like a huge growth sector and a huge opportunity for economic stimulus and growth and development towards that desired social responsibility and reduced climate impact.
Thanks, Ashley. Robert, how would you add to that?
No, that's great, Ashley. I agree. You look at, clean tech, clean growth. You look at the different definitions, and there's different terminologies, and I guess, it's kind of broad from a sense of, what could be seen as upstream or downstream or the different technologies, and we know it can apply to other things like either water quality or wastewater treatment. But again, from the context of where we look at it from a renewable energy standpoint and the technologies that go into that definition of renewable energies, it really is in that advance of the reduction in gas or greenhouse gas emissions. And to Ashley's point, the resource is very strong here. And to go back to your question to say what does the industry look like in Newfoundland right now, I would say it looks promising. We have rich resources, water power, solar, wind, offshore wind, hydrokinetic, wave. It's a question of how we understand those resources and how we map out a plan to better utilize those in the interest of a long-term climate action plan, and back to what you said, Ashley, and you probably chatted a bit more about it yesterday, but that holistic approach and how we look at the technologies in the industry. So again, answering the question, I look at what we have here in front of us as very promising. The question is, how do we move forward and better understand what we can do within the industry, and especially from an economic standpoint.
Thanks, Robert. So in these scenario sessions, we kind of want to look at, the short to medium term and then look further out in terms of what role the sector can play for economic recovery for the province. And of course, with COVID-19, every sector, every business, every individual has been affected. To what degree do you see the clean growth sector having been impacted? And then looking forward, and we know NIA released their recommendations this morning for clean growth economic recovery. And we know the federal government expected to have significant stimulus support over the late summer into the fall. And we hear language around, it's not going to be just enough to have shovel-ready projects. You'll need shovel-worthy projects. And so what role do you think clean tech can play in post-pandemic economic recovery? So the immediate impact, and then where we go from here. Robert, you want to lead off?
Sure. I guess if you look at it from if you want to talk about challenges and opportunities, I guess for me, the always being the optimist, there's always opportunities. But from a challenging point of view, I think what we're recognizing now, which is also an opportunity, we're approaching a kind of a working within a new normal, and that's created maybe challenges, people getting used to working outside the office, but it certainly created opportunities in how we might do our business a bit differently. And I'm sure, Ashley can probably expand on that yesterday, because I know she had some good thoughts on that yesterday. But from an opportunity point of view, I really look at some things that have come through COVID that will certainly help post-COVID. And a couple of things that I think about is one, collaborations within industry. We can talk about our oil and gas industry, which has been very important to the local economy, and we can also discuss, from a perspective of oil and gas and the fact that they'll certainly exist in the marketplace, but there's opportunities from a clean tech perspective in that industry, and I think what we're seeing is an opportunity in collaboration amongst industries and better understanding on how we work together for that shared and common goal, both from a climate change perspective, but also the local economy. And I think the other one, an opportunity is I don't know, we'll say not to say a renewed focus. I think renewable energy has always been there, and I think it's grown in the populace over the last 5 to 10 years from emerging technologies in wind and other technologies. But I think what we're seeing from a federal, provincial, and even a societal point of view is it's a very clear focus and seen as an opportunity coming out of this recent pandemic. So I think, Rob, the way I would look at it is, yes, there's challenges, and we can certainly chat about, what we have to do here as a province in better understanding our resources, how we implement those resources, export potential, and how we map and plan that out. But the opportunity is clearly there. And I think coming out of post-COVID, I think we're going to leverage what we've learned and how to work through the pandemic, but also with regards to, I think there's a renewed focus. There's a desire to see clean tech work forward. And I think we'll see collaboration across lots of industry and all levels of government.
Thanks, Robert. Ashley, your thoughts on the current COVID impact, but also the role of clean tech moving forward?
Sure. So one thing that I think is interesting, and you see it in all sort of moments of, like you could call it pinch or crisis, depending on how melodramatic you want to be about the whole thing. But like a moment where you have to identify a little more clearly what you're aiming at because of external factors. And COVID's created that for us. It created it in Newfoundland. It created it across Canada, across North America, across the world. Like everybody had a whole like, what do we do now moment, which is always difficult to go through. But coming out the other side of it, I find that there's been actually a lot of value. So one of the things that I've noticed is that there's more alignment between the various levels of government and even from a global perspective. So there, in Canada specifically and with Newfoundland, there's been a recognition that, okay, like we cannot continue on our current trajectory, like a pandemic trajectory, or coming out of a pandemic trajectory. We have to find a new way of doing this, the new normal, as Robert referred to it. And so I think in terms of being like top of mind and top of heart for these issues, so interesting things from my perspective and in our daily operations, that there's some observations. The first is that people have identified that there's like a clear ability to do work remotely, whereas there was no previous appetite or no like acknowledgement or desire, because you didn't need to, right? And so like you would just continue to do things the way you had always done them, which was fine, and that worked. But in doing that, like the ability to work remotely does two things. The first is that it reduces your climate impact immediately, because you're no longer going out and driving to work, or maybe flying as much, or doing any of those things. So there's a sort of reducing of that. But at the other side, there's an expansion because of the recognition and the level of comfort with working remotely. Now people are more accustomed to, on a video platform, than trying to reach out to someone who maybe they would not have done before and would have tried to have that in-person meeting, which now is not really safe to do. And so you have this sort of like pulling back and then like exploding out at the same time, which is a really interesting thing. This is the other idea of the creating nodal economic opportunities. So you can interact with nodes where you previously wouldn't have. And so that opens up from a strictly Newfoundland and Labrador perspective, the idea that like we can create these self-sustaining nodal economies in rural places, and that clean tech actually offers a lot of opportunity in doing that. Most renewable energy technologies, or clean technologies, however you want to define those, like work in a disaggregated fashion. You work in a network, you work in nodal, you work in that. And so the whole premise of the industry and logic and perspective that most who work in the industry take like applies to when you come out of this economic situation that we're in, like a new way of approaching the problem. And those within the clean tech industry are fairly accustomed to trying to find a different perspective, trying to find a different way of looking at the problem or asking a different question in order to solve that problem. And I think there's a lot of value that our industry can bring to transitioning us out to find that new normal that rests more in a climate minded and like a climate conscious decision making process.
So lots of ways innovation is becoming essential, but also ways it's being enabled. So some room for optimism. There is a gorilla in the room in Newfoundland and Labrador, of course, when we talk about green tech. The NIA release today addresses it. Maybe I'll start with Robert on this one. There is a sentiment in the province that the move toward green tech is to the detriment of the oil and gas industry. What role do you think the oil and gas industry plays in the move towards green tech and clean growth, or does it? Or is it diametrically opposed? What's your take on that?
No, I think that gets back to the point of collaboration and working together, and I think there definitely is space for both, and I see oil and gas playing a significant role. Oil and gas companies are leaders in R&D and have opportunities to move technologies forward, and I think from our perspective and looking at our oil and gas industry and the opportunities that exist. If you want to call it the greener barrel of oil and the move within the market, that we'll likely see a reduction globally in the demand for oil and gas, but I don't think you'll ever see zero demand. So if we've got an opportunity here and we can better position that in the global market and clean tech can support that, I see the oil and gas companies definitely being a part of that support to the clean tech sector. And then any opportunities from our own growing economy and transition of skills, because there are skills that are transferable in the oil and gas industry to clean tech, be it offshore wind, the subsea, the offshore piece. So I think there's certainly an opportunity to link with that transferable skill set. But no, I see it being an opportunity for that collaboration and working together. And I think the clean tech can actually support oil and gas in what's happening in the market just for that industry, but also then leveraging those technologies and experiences put into the R&D side in the renewables and the clean tech in general, and how that might be applied in other market spaces, be it water supply or renewable energies. And I think that collaboration would be successful to both industries. And I think what we're trying to do here is it's not one industry against the other. We all live in this province, and we want what's best for the province. And certainly there's an opportunity to grow the economy across a number of industries. And if we collaborate, I think everybody will just be successful.
Thanks, Robert. Ashley, your thoughts on that tangly one?
Well, yeah, I think Robert and my thinking on this is very much in alignment. I am always a believer in partnerships, and I don't know how anyone could imagine that you wouldn't go forward in some sort of partnership basis. I mean, oil as a petroleum base is in almost everything. That, like, we talked about this yesterday. Like, I looked around my desk and I'm like, I can't see a thing that didn't involve oil. So to try and exclude them somehow or create this like false divide of an us-them antagonistic relationship, to me, is foolhardy and unwise and just impractical. There's not a lot of sense in trying to do that. I mean, the oil and gas as an industry, I mean, they have access to data and technology that would work really well together. They have access to human resources and engineering design, and I mean everything that goes along with trying to um, trying to do something. That seems like a really inarticulate way of explaining what I'm trying to do, but like when you create an action plan, it's a human that creates that action plan, and you need the kind of people who have the vision and the skills to like move you from concept all the way through. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's all the same. And I mean, NOYA and the province and NIA, it supports this. Like we all recognize that we need to get to like a net zero situation by 2050. There's been discussions about this and various levels of commitment, but that's the kind of common vision that you just sort of all need to start rowing the oars in the same direction together. Altruism, and like if you look at economic theory and even like biological behavioral ecology, like altruism and partnerships always work better in the long run than trying to pit yourself against one another. It never, I mean, unless you're a bull who's trying to pass his genes on, which isn't what we're doing. The best way is to work together, and so I am definitely all for that. I mean, Newfoundland's oil, I think in the NIA report said that like we're 30% like less carbon intensive than the global average. So I mean, in terms of the Newfoundland and Labrador's position as an oil and gas industry, like we should advocate and articulate that value quite well, because it puts us in a much better position where everyone's focused on reducing carbon emissions.
Thanks, Ashley. And if you're viewing online on WebEx, you can go to the Q&A box on the right side. Kathy Newhook is keeping track of that, and she will pose any questions that come in for Ashley and Robert. And if you're on Facebook Live, Mandy Rousel is keeping track of that. You can go in the comments section. And John, I don't know if Kathy has anything for us there now. I do have some other questions I can go to.
There's nothing in there yet, Rob, so you can go ahead with your questions and people can give us a chance to type away.
Right on. Well, one of the, as we look longer term now in the scenario planning, or the various scenarios on the various sectors that create wealth for our province, when you think about clean tech and green industries and looking out 5 to 10 years, what's needed to move it forward? What are the gaps in our province now? What are the major opportunities and how do we realize them? Are there lessons from other jurisdictions that we can be adopting? And maybe Ashley, do you want to go first on that one?
Absolutely. So there's a number of things. Rob, you have mentioned in a couple of times here NIA's recommendations. All of those, I think there's 12 or 13 of them I am 100% on board with. But kind of at a higher level in terms of like the efforts and planning that I would like to see now to sort of set the trajectory for the future would be to evaluate how we're managing our nutrient and energy sources. So like that's a very sciencey way, like a biologist would say nutrients, engineer would call it like a mass or energy balance. But that the logic of, instead of having like a linear approach to our infrastructure, which is what we currently have now. So if you know, we have recycling, but lots of stuff still ends up in landfill. If we're looking at watershed, like we don't create a cycle that matches with a water cycle. When you look at any natural cycles, they're always circles. So a shift in focus for all of the ways that we manage the stuff that we use and see and do and work with every day, to a more cyclical approach. And so that has impacts for a lot of industries, wastewater, energy, all of that. And sorry, a motorcycle just went by. I would also like to see like a mapping of the natural and like clean tech industry resources across Newfoundland, and the like with the same sort of attention as what happens when we're starting to try and map like methane or natural gas, or they're the same thing, or any of your oil opportunities. But that sort of effort and focus, so that when we start to move out of this, Newfoundland is a position to be able to advocate really well for itself and articulate our value as a renewable and clean natural resource sector for Canada, but also the world. And the same sort of vision, if we can all kind of get on board with the same vision, then everyone kind of does that. And that has happened to various levels. That's kind of started in terms of some of the commitments and acknowledgements that you hear. But if there could be, or something coalesces into a clear vision, I think that would go a long way towards making sure that the partnerships sort of form really naturally and organically as you move forward. It's just clear that, okay, like obviously we have to work together to do this. And that's what I would like to see.
So, Ashley, I'll turn to Robert in a second. When you look at some of the activities your firm is involved in, I know you mentioned yesterday working with a lot of municipalities across the province, but also working with the housing industry and some of those. So where do you see the real growth sector opportunities for Newfoundland and Labrador over the next 5-10 years and beyond?
Sort of like asking about a crystal ball. I can tell you what I would like to see, and where I think that there would be a lot of value. So in terms of asset management, from a municipal perspective, or even from anyone who just has like a large portfolio of assets, taking an eco asset management approach so that you acknowledge climate vulnerabilities, you acknowledge the limits of like engineered gray infrastructure. I'm using air quotes because I find those terms kind of divisive, but acknowledging the natural system has value to bring for a lowest life cycle cost approach. So I think trying to figure out how we put in resilient infrastructure is going to be key. I would like to see a shift in how we manage waste. I would like to see more like a more cyclical economy approach to waste. So not seeing waste as waste, but seeing waste as like the beginning of a new cycle. So, I mean, compost is a pretty clear one in terms of being able to compost, fund some level of garden, like grow food with it here, and then address food security issues, which we know like happen every winter. But aside from that, when the ferries don't run, aside from that, like we're very apparent in terms of what happened with COVID. I'd like to see something like that, and I would like to see something happen to make our electricity grid a bit more robust and resilient. So and what that looks like there's huge financial implications that would need to be discussed and how that kind of happens one way or another. But when you look at what the International Energy Association or the UN or any of the sort of highly respected peer reviewed reports that come out, they say like an electrification is the only way that we're going to achieve what we need to achieve, and that we have to find ways to supply electricity in a renewable way. And where we're on an island, and where because of like just the geographics of how we're arranged, I think building like smart grid type technology, so you have battery backups, you have electric cars, you can pull and push and move and shift, and that's the same logic with the nodal approach to things. I think that would have a high value for the province and the security of the folks who live here.
Right on. Well, I see lots of nodding by Robert. So what's your take on looking out 5-10 years and beyond, some of the barriers, but also some of the opportunities, and what do we need to do to realize them?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with a lot of what Ashley just said, and there's some key words that I picked up on, vision, collaboration, having a plan, and I think what we need to do is we need to, there's always a tendency to look backwards and not forward, and I think we need to look forward, and we need to have a plan that kind of maps out over the next 3 to 5 years an overall vision. If you look at the opportunities, if you want to call what's immediately in front of us and what could be down the path, you look at what we have here in the province. And again, I'm coming back to kind of that greenhouse gas emissions and the renewables and the clean tech. But when Muskrat Falls comes online, we talk about being 97, 98% renewable. And then you look at, we have off-grid diesel communities that would still be burning fossil fuels. And then we have our oil and gas sector, which again, there's opportunities for clean tech there to reduce. So I think we need to look at the immediate opportunities, and we need to have collaboration and a vision across all industries, government, private, and of course, at the community base, because we do need to ensure that everything we do, fits with societal norms and what works within the communities. So I think we have to look at a path and setting a course of action. And I think what Nia put out today, I think I would strongly suggest everybody go take a look at that after this meeting, because I think that's the principle of getting the conversation started and creating a plan. And I think what we need to do then is have everybody come together and again, all levels of government and private and public sector and support that. So I think there's immediate opportunities, and those immediate opportunities is what we just discussed with our oil and gas industry, the clean tech, some of the off-grid diesel communities and renewable energy. And then the opportunities is the looking forward and looking down the road. One of the I won't say problems, we'll say challenges, we have is, although we're now connected to the North American grid, we do have transmission capacity limitations, and, recognizing the potential of the growth of your renewable energy is constrained by, export markets. So I think what we need to do is we need to look forward, we need to look at new technologies, and we need to plan for that rather than waiting 3 to 5 years for the technology to be here and we're then behind. I think we need to look to be leaders, and we also need to look to other jurisdictions and also see what other countries and groups are doing. And just as a point of reference, we have partners in Iceland, Landsvirkjun Power, and they're 100% renewable, and they are looking forward at opportunities, and it's been mentioned, hydrogen as well, and even in Nia's context. So I think we need to start looking at what other countries are doing. I think we need to set out a plan, and I think we just need to understand what we have in front of us and map that plan out. I mean, one of the things our partners always say, they have a principle in Iceland called life, look inside for energy. And they have to look at what they have in front of them and their challenges and how they move that forward. So I see it nothing different than doing it here. We just need to look inside to what we have in front of us and just figuring out how to move that forward and creating a plan.
I can riff off some of what you just said there, Robert, but first I should check back with Kathy. Any questions, comments that you want us to address there, Kathy?
Yeah, we've had a couple come in. The first one is actually from Chris Patterson, who's a Harris Center employee, but of course has all this stuff near and dear to his heart. So he asks, clearly cleaner energy options are a huge part of clean tech and cleaner growth, but what are the other key opportunities in other sectors that we should be looking carefully at in Newfoundland and Labrador?
Ashley, want to go first there?
Sure. So when you say energy, Chris, you can jump in and correct me, but I am assuming you're meaning like our electricity grid and energy provision. And so there's a lot of other opportunities in terms of what clean tech really means. So I mean, we've talked about like re-envisioning how we handle waste here. And taking a cyclical approach to how that's handled, that will have energy consequences, because there's lots of things that you can do with that. So you can do heat recovery from aerobic composting, you can do methane recovery from anaerobic composting. Whenever you do either of those things, there is an enormous emissions impact associated with the avoided landfill. You can start to look at like other value chains for some of the products. Like we don't recycle glass, but glass and silica, like pulverized glass, is a huge opportunity. When you look at the marine industry, for example, there's huge opportunities for electrification in those boats, or as in the NIA, it's in the NIA document that came out today, using like the oil recycling filters to improve the engine performance and the life of that, and just, I mean, you just use less oil, which I mean has really significant life cycle impacts for the production of the lubricating fluids and that kind of thing. And we have, like, in terms of other sectors around, being able to grow our own food locally would address like huge impacts, like carbon footprint of food that gets brought here if we can produce some of the things locally. If we look to, my goodness, like anything that you think of that you have in your life can sort of be involved, and that's why the definition of what you call clean tech is like you have to be fairly focused, and I defined it really broadly as sort of the nesting together of social responsibility and climate impact reduction. Again, the idea of infrastructure within municipalities, or anyone with, I mean, any organization with assets. If you take an eco asset management approach with the lowest life cycle cost, you can avoid like having to put the pipes in the ground and the emissions associated with those, and then the emissions associated with fixing them when there's a disaster, and all of the social impacts that happen. So I mean, really, you can put your fingers in every pie that you want to put it in, and there is definitely an opportunity there. Thank you for that question, Chris.
Robert, anything you want to add to that one?
Not too much more. It was a great question. I think Ashley answered it quite well. I think the key there is one of the points Ashley made is around electrification. If you look at other industries, and you mentioned about the fishing industry, you could look at, we talked about off-grid earlier, and then you look at mining operations, even just from electrification and charging for cars. So, I don't think there's much more I would add there, only to support Ashley's answer that there definitely is other opportunities within other sectors. Electrification is definitely a key component of that, and it's certainly something in this broader review. As you map out a plan and a vision, you would have to look into those other industries to see where clean tech certainly could be applied.
Sure. Boundless opportunities. Kathy, time for one quick more question, I think, if you have one there.
Sure. This is a great one. It comes in from Ian Murdoch. What role can education and training institutes like MUN and CNA play in helping grow our clean tech industry?
Thank you. Robert, you can be first on this, and this will be your last comment, so wrap up whatever you want to say now.
No, that's great. Thanks, Rob. So it's a great question, because it's a significant role, and I think, again, it gets back to the planning aspect of understanding the opportunity, and then providing the right education and training. And I can kind of speak to, I guess I can use an example. It doesn't necessarily relate directly to me, because when I finished in '96, I went straight into renewables, and that's basically what I've done my whole career. But I did witness early in the '90s in the engineering program how oil and gas was certainly being discussed, and Hibernia was under construction. That as we went through our program in engineering, from when we started to when we finished in '96, you sure saw that emphasis in oil and gas coming towards the end. And especially then when Hibernia came online, then there was oil and gas programs, and certainly it was being supported at the institutional and the university and college level. So I see that example as being similar here. We need to understand that there's clearly an opportunity, and a significant opportunity, and it's a great opportunity for our educational institutions to provide similar supports and understand what that market looks like. And there should be no reason why we can't go to our local institutions to take renewable energy courses, or finish with the renewable energy type degrees, or clean tech, or even to Ashley's point on the infrastructure side, and better understanding what can be done even from a building code and infrastructure. So I think it's a great question. I think they play a significant role. And if we look back in history on how we changed some of our programs to suit a growing demand for an industry back in the mid to late 90s. I see it no different now that if we see a great opportunity in the clean tech sector, our educational institutions should certainly be ahead of that curve as well in providing those necessary tools for the next workforce, because I truly believe that individuals entering the workforce over the next 5 to 10 years. And you mentioned it earlier, Rob, about the economy and the global economy. It's just not here that these opportunities exist; they're global. So we should be training our next group of individuals entering the workforce to support that global market, and there's no reason why we can't do it here locally.
Thanks, Robert. Ashley, your answer to that question and any final comment you want to make.
Absolutely. So I sort of feel like in a time of change, I think it's like everyone's responsibility to try and figure out how they can be a part of that change. And so there is always a role for anyone who's interested. Like if you want to do something, be good at it and you will be successful. You'll find a way. Like, and that's true of anything. I think they say that in business school all the time. But in terms of the clean tech sector and growing it specifically, I know what we have done is access like cutting edge research and like really innovative research. So we're working with a professor in the civil engineering department to do watershed modeling as the basis for our eco asset management program. And so that's been really effective. Like we've had really great opportunities, and we're working with another professor and a graduate student in the electrical engineering department to design high level solar microgrid for a municipality. And so that does a couple of things. The first is, to quote Andy Fisher, it makes the walls of the ivory tower more porous, which are really helpful because there's so many great minds in there. And it also gives the student access to like a real world opportunity, which is better than a made up one just to finish an assignment or do what you need to do to get marks and learn a thing, right? If you have a real way to engage with a real client, like there's a lot more benefit. I remember when I was going to school, I was always excited for that opportunity, and so I would like to see, in terms of teaching our youth anything, that we teach them to ask why we're doing what we're doing, as well as the how of what we're doing. And I think that like there's a key role internal to our educational institutions in trying to make that happen, because we focus a lot on the technical, like how do you model this, or how do you do the math for that, how do you size something, but there's not a lot of emphasis on like why we chose to do it that way in the first place, like why we chose that solution for the problem. And I think in this particular moment in existence, it's really critical to start asking, okay, like why was that designed that way, or why are we approaching the problem in this way, and that it falls to everyone to try and answer that for themselves.
Great. Lots of great insights there on the role of post-secondary and teaching and learning research, but also the stuff the Harris Center plays in public engagement and knowledge mobilization. And any session that quotes Andy Fisher can't be all bad. Former associate dean undergraduate. And now
I hope he doesn't mind that I said that.
No, he does great. We've partnered with Andy many times. Well, that concludes this session, and thanks a million for those people who emailed in questions or went online. Thanks to all of you who joined us today. We're happy to have hoping to have one more session, and we'll be happy if we have it in a couple of weeks before we wind down these sessions for the summer. But we'll be back again in the fall with some more conversations, as well as some exciting new programs, and many, in fact, around the theme of this session. So stay tuned for that. Keep an eye on our website and on our social media channels for updates. Don't forget to sign on to the Harris Center newsletter, the regional. It's a great way to get all the latest information about upcoming events, new initiatives, and the latest reports and podcasts. If you have any questions or suggestions, send us an email. And thanks again to the Harris Center team. Kathy Newhook really carries this program on her back. Thank you, Kathy, as always. And Mandy Rousel as well plays a great role in that. John Duff with the Emera Innovation Exchange, thanks again for your great work. And thanks especially to our guests, Ashley and Robert, for their thoughtful responses. Thanks a million. And have a great day, everybody. It's a balmy day in Newfoundland here today. So get out and enjoy it if you can. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.